Hi everyone, this is just a continuation of the last vlog, the art one. If you haven't watched the first part, there will be a link to it in the description. Now the last video covered about making mistakes when drawing for composition and just so you could get ideas out there. I talked about encouraging people to draw throwaway pieces to later use for ideas in main drawings. Now for this video, I'm going to talk about how to make the drawing work in general, and that's with drawing and coloring from Grayscale first. Now in this video and the last, you would notice that I started to draw and color from muted colors first, but instead what I should have done is work with my values first, just start off completely in Grayscale. So what I did here was just throw away the colors and continued from shades of gray. Also, there is a way to add in color, but I'll get to this a bit later. Now the reason I'm bringing Grayscale up is because this method is essentially a good way to just get your light source out of the way right off the bat. Grayscale, as the name suggests, is just starting off from black and white and grays. A good rule of thumb is just to get the shading out of the way and then make sure it looks good from there. Pick where your shadows and light sources would be, and as soon as everything looks good, then you would color. Now, one question that people might bring up, which is a good question actually, is why not color first, then shade later? What's the point? You can do that if you want. The problem is it's a lot harder to make your colors look good if you start off that way. Exception would be if you're incredibly good working with colors, but as a safety thing, it's better to just work on Grayscale. And this isn't just for the painting style, this could be with any art style you work with. It's a lot easier. The reason this is the case is because the human eye looks at things from values, which is where the light source is, where shadows are, and then it thinks about color later. It's kind of weird, but this is essentially the main way to make your artwork look 3D, to be emulated that way, or at least emulate some sort of depth. Now, there are several ways to put in color after you do Grayscale. My preferred method of doing this, or coloring in general, is Photoshop, so I'm going to cover how you do it in Photoshop, but you can't get away with doing it in other programs as well as even traditionally. But this is a digital video, a digital painting video, so I'm going to talk about how it's done digitally. Now, Grayscale looks intimidating at first. I've heard a lot of people say that they normally don't tackle it because it's just kind of weird. But it is the safest method, whether people realize it or not. This is because after you finish up your values, when you add in color, after choosing a color palette, if it does not work out for you, you could just get rid of that color palette and try a different one. And you don't ruin your values at all. It's much faster this way as well. Another thing, working from Grayscale first and then color really saves your drawing. If you do it the other way around, you color first and then shade, and the colors aren't working out, you can really screw up your drawing, and you don't want that. If you do it in reverse, it could save you a lot of trouble. That's great because sometimes it's better not to commit to a specific type of color, and you would go with several certain colors when working with your art, and then it's not working out, but you just went so far and went through so much trouble with it, and you're stuck with it. You have to push through. But why do that when you could do shading first and then add colors, and if the colors you don't like, you could just switch to different ones. Now for Photoshop has blend modes in layers that you can mess with. This is what I use to color my artwork. I put a new layer on top and then switch to a blend mode that works for me. In general, I use overlay, not because it's the correct choice, but because I personally like it a lot. You don't have to use overlay. If you watch the video, you would notice that I use overlay, I use multiply, I use color dodge. I believe I also use screen and color burn. I'll have to, this is post commentating, so I'll have to watch the video to make sure. Now, no blend mode is a perfect solution. It depends what you're looking for in your drawing, and it also depends the type of art style you're going with. For overlay, for example, if you get carried away with it, you can oversaturate your coloring, and you do not want that. So with overlay, I don't abuse it. I try not to. If it's too much, I just lower the opacity and then put another layer on top. Another problem with overlay is that you start drawing outside of it. It's great because you don't really look like you're drawing over, it looks like you're drawing over the character or an object you're coloring and not other ones. Don't be fooled by that, because if for some reason you want to merge the layers, it turns into like a normal type of coloring. What I do to avoid this is use a clipping mask, and put it on top of the specific layer that I'm coloring, so I could just color that specific thing. Lastly, if you look at the video, you would notice I tend to merge layers. That's actually a habit I got into because when I first started drawing on the computer, I started with a very weak computer with really bad specs, and I would merge layers to avoid using a lot of RAM because Photoshop is a RAM hog. You don't have to do this though. I actually don't recommend merging layers this way. However, I still want to point out that you can just do all of this in one layer if you wanted. Layers are good to make your life easier though. That's their purpose. One more thing I want to cover is that the point of this method is to not have to commit to a specific color palette. Obviously, you still need a palette, but if it doesn't work, again, you can get rid of it and try other colors. You can notice here that I've been struggling with it, but that's because I really forgot that I don't have to do that and I just pushed through it. That being said, this artwork could have been a lot worse if I started with the coloring first and then the shading. Because I did this in reverse, it actually turned out really good. Not like I wanted it, but it's doable. Think of values and shading, light sources, all that stuff being 70 to 80% of your artwork, while 20 to 30% is the actual coloring. So it's better to take control of that 70 and 80% than fighting with the 20 and 30% that might fail. So anyway, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments and I will make more vlogs like this. Thanks again, and I'll see you later. Bye.